Welcome to BWC News, I am Elizabeth. Not long ago, the U.S. quest to ease relations with Beijing received a response when Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao will visit the United States next week and meet with U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo and U.S. Trade Representative Katherine Tai, Chinese Embassy spokesman Liu Pengyu said on Thursday, May 18. Liu made the announcement at an online press conference at the Chinese Embassy, according to Reuters. He added that Beijing is open to exchanges with the United States in all fields and at all levels, but only on the basis of mutual respect. In an emailed statement, the Chinese embassy said the two sides are still discussing the details of the face-to-face program. The U.S. economy has been deteriorating over the past 2 years, with large and well-known Chinese companies divesting from the U.S. market due to the U.S.'s long-standing difficulties with Chinese companies in the U.S. and its interference with China's economic development. Not only that, China has been reducing its holdings of U.S. debt for several months, but in recent days there has been a reversal. China has started to increase its holdings of U.S. debt again one after another. Is this to pave the way for a visit to the U.S.? China-U.S. relations have eased. It is reported that during this visit to the United States, China sent the Minister of Commerce as the core negotiator. Obviously, the content of the communication to be carried out with the United States during this visit is extremely important. The sudden closeness of economic relations between China and the United States is somewhat puzzling. China's announcement to increase its holdings of U.S. debt is also a major step in the easing of trade relations between China and the U.S. in recent years, demonstrating both China's friendliness to the U.S. economy and the fact that this move effectively tears down the trade divide between China and the U.S. The increase in U.S. debt for the current economic situation of the United States is a solution to some of the pressing problems faced by the United States. Even if China is willing to sit down and talk about it, it does not mean that China is afraid to fight back. Sanctions against China's technological development are still in place. President Joe Biden said in an interview with reporters after the G7 summit that the balloon incident that occurred in February this year led to all the previous efforts to improve relations between China and the United States were in vain, but he believes that the tensions between the two countries will immediately ease. He also revealed that the U.S. side is considering lifting sanctions against the Chinese defense chief. However, Biden also made a harsh statement, claiming that the G7 countries agree that Taiwan will not declare independence, but must ensure that the Taiwanese authorities are capable of self-defense, and that if the mainland takes unilateral action against Taiwan, the United States will join its allies in a joint response. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Mao Ning said bluntly at a press conference that the U.S. said it wanted to communicate while doing whatever it could to suppress and block China and introduce various sanctions, a dialogue that lacks both sincerity and any practical meaning. Mao Ning stressed that China has always opposed long-arm jurisdiction and unilateral sanctions, and has made its attitude clear to the U.S. If the U.S. side really wants to improve Sino-U.S. relations, it should immediately withdraw all sanctions and take practical action to create a good atmosphere for interaction and remove obstacles that hinder dialogue between the two countries. Sure enough, our skepticism was justified. Biden had just promised or lifted the sanctions on the Chinese side, and less than 48 hours later, the U.S. side changed its mind. A State Department spokesman set the record straight, claiming that it would not lift the sanctions in question, including the Chinese defense chief, just because it was going to host a meeting between the two defense ministers. In fact, the above statement comes as no surprise, as the Pentagon has been actively seeking to have U.S. Defense Secretary Austin meet with Chinese Defense Minister Li Shangfu during the Shangri-La dialogue in June, but they have repeatedly said that the sanctions do not affect the meeting. Frankly, this is pure wishful thinking. For example, the Financial Times stated bluntly that if the U.S. does not take the initiative to lift the sanctions, the possibility of the U.S. and Chinese defense chiefs meeting in June this year is almost nil. The problem with the U.S. is that it has been meddling in the Taiwan Strait, interfering in China's internal affairs, and increasing sanctions against Chinese personnel, entities, and companies, which is the fundamental reason why relations between the two countries have hit rock bottom, and the so-called lifting of sanctions against the Chinese defense chief is just a minimum measure based on diplomatic etiquette. In addition, late on the 21st, the Chinese side announced the results of a review of the U.S. company Micron, which found that its products have cybersecurity risks and will pose a threat to China's national security, and has formally requested specific domestic operators to stop purchasing the company's products. After learning the news, the US side immediately jumped, claiming that the Chinese allegations baseless, threatening to join forces with allies to deal with violations in the Chinese chip market. So the US Department of State's latest statement do not rule out the retaliatory measures against China's restrictions on US optical products. If the Biden administration insists on pursuing a wrong policy towards China, it will be difficult to ease the future relations between the two sides. The relationship between China and the US is indeed somewhat contradictory. On the one hand, China's economic dealings with the US are bound to continue, while on the other hand, the US is still carrying out sanctions against China's technological development. But the good thing is, as many countries around the world continue to de-dollarize, the stage for the yuan is getting bigger and bigger, and China has more initiative. The United States is now distracted by its own economic problems, and China no longer needs to spend much effort to deal with them.